My parents laughed when my sister called me a failure until her millionaire husband stood up for me. That moment is burned into my memory because it was the first time in my life I felt like someone in my family finally saw me as more than the disappointment I had always been made out to be. I grew up as the middle child in a very achievement-driven household. My dad is an engineer who worked his way up through a big company, and my mom stayed home but ran the family like it was her full-time job. My older sister, let's call her Rachel, was always the golden child. Straight as captain of her sports team, scholarships, internships, all that stuff. She's smart, driven, and honestly good at almost everything. Then there's me, who struggled through high school, barely passed college after changing majors twice, and never seemed to land on my feet career-wise. And finally, my younger brother, who's still in college and hasn't really been compared yet because the spotlight is usually on me and Rachel. For as long as I can remember, family dinners were like report cards. Rachel would announce some new accomplishment, my parents would gush over it, and then they'd turn to me and ask what I was doing. And whatever I said never sounded good enough. I remember once saying I was proud of finishing a 10K race I trained for, and my mom's response was, "That's nice, but have you thought about grad school? You need something more concrete." It felt like nothing I did was worth being acknowledged unless it could be measured in money or status. Over time, I stopped talking much at family gatherings because I didn't feel like anyone wanted to hear what I had to say. Rachel married this guy named Mark about 5 years ago. He's a self-made business owner, very successful, but also one of the kindest and most grounded people I've ever met. I actually like him a lot, which is saying something because I have a hard time connecting with people my sister brings around, since it always feels like another comparison waiting to happen. But from the start, Mark never treated me like I was beneath him. He asked me questions, listened when I talked, and seemed genuinely interested in my life. He'd ask me about books I was reading or hobbies I was trying, and he never made me feel dumb about my answers. The incident that still makes my chest tight happened about a year ago at my parents' house during Thanksgiving. We were all at the table, and my mom asked about my job situation. At the time, I was working part-time at a local bookstore and doing freelance graphic design on the side. It wasn't glamorous, but I enjoyed it. I started explaining how I was building a small client base and how I was considering expanding it into something bigger. Before I could finish, Rachel laughed. Like an actual laugh. Then she said, "God, you're almost 30, and you're still playing around with side gigs. You're such a failure compared to where you should be by now." I froze. My dad chuckled like it was funny, and my mom tried to stifle a smile. I felt my face go hot, and I wanted to disappear. I'd been called worse before, but this time it stung more because it wasn't just my sister. It was my parents laughing too. It was like confirmation of everything I'd ever feared they thought of me. For a few seconds no one said anything, and I thought maybe I'd just swallow it like I always do. Then Mark spoke up. He looked straight at Rachel and said, "That's not fair. You might not see it, but what he's doing takes guts. Starting something on your own, figuring it out without a safety net, that's harder than just following the path everyone expects. You call that failure? I call that courage." The room went silent. My sister's face went red, and my parents both looked like they didn't know what to say. I was shocked. Nobody in my family had ever defended me like that. For once, I wasn't the punchline. After dinner, Mark pulled me aside. He told me that he respected me for not giving up even when things were tough. He said he'd met plenty of people who looked successful on paper but were miserable because they lived for someone else's approval. Then he told me something I've never forgotten. Success isn't about keeping score. It's about building a life that feels like yours. Don't let anyone tell you different. I think I nodded, but I was honestly fighting tears because nobody had ever said anything like that to me. In the months since, I've thought a lot about that night. It didn't magically fix my relationship with my family, but it did change how I see myself. I realized I've been carrying around this weight of not being enough because that's the role my family put me in. The failure sibling. But when Mark stood up for me, it cracked that image, even if just a little. It made me wonder if maybe I don't have to accept that narrative anymore. I've been working on my graphic design business more seriously since then. It's still small, but I've landed a couple of steady clients, and for the first time I feel like I'm building something that could last. I'm not rich, and I don't have a fancy title, but I'm proud of what I'm doing. And that's new for me, feeling proud without waiting for someone else to validate it. My relationship with Rachel is complicated now. On the surface, we're polite, but I can tell she didn't like being called out by her husband. Sometimes I wonder if she feels threatened by the idea that maybe she doesn't get to define me anymore. My parents haven't changed much either. They still drop hints about me finding a real career, but I've stopped letting their words cut as deep. I keep thinking back to that night and remembering that even someone as accomplished as Mark sees value in what I'm doing. It reminds me that maybe success isn't one size fits all. The truth is, I'm still learning how to believe in myself. It's hard to undo years of being the lesser child in the family. But that night gave me something I didn't know I needed. A witness. Someone to stand up and say, "Hey, you're not invisible. You're not worthless." It was such a small thing in the grand scheme of life, just a few sentences at a dinner table, but to me it was everything. I guess I'm sharing this here because I want to let go of some of the bitterness I've been holding. I don't know if my family will ever see me differently, and maybe that's not the point anymore. Maybe the point is learning to see myself differently, regardless of what they say. For the first time in my life, I'm trying to measure my worth by my own standards, not theirs. And it feels terrifying, but also kind of freeing.
So yeah.
My parents laughed when my sister called me a failure, but her husband stood up for me. And that one moment shifted something in me I didn't think could ever change.